Hey, 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 Texas Study students. This is Coach Science. Welcoming you back to another video lesson. And today's video lesson will be on Chapter 4.2 and Native Texans. The first Native Texans group we're going to be studying today are the Gulf Coast Natives. The first one is the Coahuiltecans. The second one is the Karankawas. As you can see here on this map that we have, from Brownsville all the way up to just east of Houston, Port Arthur, and Orange, Texas, this makes up the Gulf Coast region. Now, if we look at the other map right here on the left-hand side, we see the relation of where the Gulf Coast is all along Texas right here. The first tribe that we're going to talk about today is the Coahuiltecans. The Coahuiltecans, which comes from the Spanish name Coahuila, originated in Coahuila, the state of Mexico, and lived here in the Rio Grande Valley as well. The RGV. That's right. Now, they lived down here in South Texas. Now, as you can see here in this picture here represents a lot of the area here in the valley. Dry, very dry area, a lot of trees, mesquite trees mainly. All right. This tribe was a nomadic tribe. That means they would move everywhere, if you remember from your last vocabulary diagrams. Now, they were also a hunters and gatherer. That means they would gather things and hunt just to be able to move. They ate bugs and prickly pears, which is mainly another part of their diet. Now, the Coahuiltecans were not a warlike tribe. They were very peaceful in that sense. Now, the next tribe we're going to talk about today is the Karankawas. The Karankawas lived along the Gulf Coast of Mexico. Right there, as you can see. The Coahuiltecans, the ones that we just talked about right now, lived on the interior, right? But the Karankawas lived along the Gulf Coast there. Just like the Coahuiltecans, the Karankawas were nomadic hunters and gatherers. They would travel up and down the coast to feed and to hunt and gather food. They used fishing nets and traps to do this. They were big-time fishermen, very big on fishermen. Now, to do that, to be able to be fishermen and live along the Gulf Coast, as you can see there, they used dug-out canoes to travel between the islands. As you can see in this picture here, they have the canoes that would travel between island to island, and this is what's used to be able to fish. Now, unlike the Coahuiltecans, the Karankawas were very warlike. They liked to fight. They liked to get in disputes. They liked to defend their territories. Now, when they would defeat the people that they were going up against, they would eat them. That's right. They would eat their enemies, and that's why we have researched and found out that they were cannibals. Research has said that they are cannibals, and they would eat their enemies, not themselves, but their enemies. Now, the next area of Texas we're going to look into its natives is the East Texas natives. East Texas is located here in this area right here, this red area of the Texas map. And the three tribes that we're going to be talking about today in the East Texas natives are the Cadoo, the Alabama-Coushatta, and the Cherokee. Now, remember that these three tribes belong to the Coastal Plains region. Now, the first East Texas tribe that we're going to talk about is the Cadoo. Now, the Cadoo were sedentary. That means that they lived in permanent huts. As you can see here, they lived in these dome-shaped huts right here, and that big one back there. They lived permanently there. That means that they stayed there. They didn't go anywhere else. They weren't nomadic like the last tribes that we talked about, but they stayed there. Now, the tribe was actually led by a chief. There was a head man, a chief that led the tribe and the different areas of the tribe, right? But here's the thing. Once they entered the household there, the home was led by the eldest woman. That means he could make all the decisions in the world, and he thought he was a big man all out here. But as soon as you stepped in there, the oldest woman was the ruler of the house. That's right. So he had to do whatever he had to make the eldest woman happy. Now also, When the Cadoo greeted the Europeans, when the Europeans came into the New World and they actually met up with the Cadoo, they discovered the Cadoo, became friends with them. The Cadoo greeted them with the word Tejas, which means friends. Now, it wasn't a Spanish word. A lot of people think that Tejas was a Spanish word, but no, it was actually a Cadoo word, a Cadoo Indian word. And this also brings up, which is our state motto, which is friendship. Now, the second East Texas tribe we're going to talk about today is the Alabama-Coushatta. Now, this is a combination of two tribes that came into Texas a little late after its discovery. Now, this is a combination of the Alabama Indian tribe and the Coushatta Indian tribe coming together right here, as you can see. Now, they came to Texas in the 1700s, right? And they created a system of trails to help them travel within Texas and to Texas. This is why they're really important, because they came together to create this. Now, they are only one of only three tribes, right, as you can see there, still living in Texas today. Okay? Now, as you can see there, since they are only one of three tribes still living, here we see a picture of the land that was set apart for them, a reservation by the government to have their land here in Texas. And here we see the sign right there, as you can see it, a couple seconds to read it. As you can see there, how important their reservation is here in Texas. Now, the third East Texas tribe that we're going to talk about today is the Cherokee. Now, along with the Alabama-Coushatta, here we can see right there, Texas Cherokees right there. They landed in East Texas right there. They came to Texas even later than the Alabama-Coushatta. They came in the 1800s right there, 1823, as you can see in that picture right there of the Texas Cherokees. Now, they lived in log cabins, right? We can see in the next picture, here we go. They lived in log cabins like this one here. Now, these Cherokee, because they came so late in the 1800s, they adapted to European customs more and easier than other tribes did before them. That's why you can see that they didn't live so much in the teepees or in huts. They lived in a more common log house and log cabin like the Europeans did at that time. Now, the next group of Texas natives we're going to be talking about the Plains natives. Now, here we can see our picture here of Texas and where our each natives were. We're just going to talk about the coastal plains and these natives here. Right now, we're going to talk about the Plains natives. The first ones are the Comanche. The Comanches ruled here in the Great Plains, right? Talk about the Great Plains and the North Central Plains. Next, we're going to talk about the Apache. It's right here in these Great Plains as well. And last but not least, the Kiowa, which were up here in the Great Plains. Now, these two lived in the both North Central and the Great Plains. The first group we're going to talk about today are the Comanches. As you can see here, this is a Comanche tribe. All right. The Comanches were very nomadic, and they lived in teepees. All right. They moved from place to place, all up and down the Great Plains and the North Central Plains. The reason that they did this was because they depended on the buffalo for survival. They would kill the buffalo for its meat, hides, bones, and later on in this coming weeks, we're going to find out why the buffalo was so important to the Great Plains Indians. Now, they would use the skin and the hide for the teepees and for all this right here, where they would layer it out and make the huts. Now, one thing that the Comanches were known for were they were very fierce warriors, great warriors that defended their lands. The next tribe we're going to talk about is the Apache. Now, the Apache was also nomadic, right? But it grew corn, beans, and pumpkins for food for trade. They traded with other tribes. Now, just like the Comanche, they also depended on the buffalo. As we can see here, they depended greatly on the buffalo. Now, although the Apache were warriors, great warriors, they weren't as great as the Comanche, as they were forced to move southwest by the Comanches. They were pushed and pushed and pushed until finally they were moved out to the southwest. Now, the next tribe that we're going to talk about is the Kiowa tribe. Kiowa Indians were up here in northern Great Plains of Texas. Now, they were some of the most feared nomadic tribes of the plains. Now, another thing that they did was they recorded their oral history on the teepees inside of their huts, their teepees. They would record things, and they were the very first ones, one of the very first tribes to develop a calendar. Now, another thing that the Kiowa Indians did when the Europeans came over was that they bred horses and traded with the other tribes like the Comanche. One of the things that they did was once they received these horses, they would trade with other Indian tribes for goods, and they would give the horses out and receive things in return. Now, the next East Texas natives that we're going to talk about are the Pueblo Natives. The Pueblo Natives include the Jumanos and the Tiguas, which are located here in the mountains and basins region of Texas, as we can see in this picture. Now, the first tribe we're going to talk about is the Jumanos. Now, before we talk about the Jumanos, we need to know that when the Spanish came over here, came to the west side of Texas and started interacting with these tribes, they called these tribes Pueblo because they were sedentary. That means that they weren't nomadic. They didn't move from place to place. They were actually in one location, and they stayed there. They wouldn't move around. That's why Pueblo is a Spanish word meaning village. A Pueblo. That's why they're called as the Pueblo Natives. Now, the Jumanos were farmers and hunters. They would farm for their food as well as go hunt as well. Now, as we can see here, they lived in beautifully painted adobe homes like this one right here, as you can see. The second Pueblo Native tribe we're going to talk about are the Tiguas. Now, the Tiguas were sedentary farmers who lived in adobe homes. Just like the Jumanos that we just talked about right now, the Tigua did not move around. They were sedentary. They stayed where they were. They did not move around. They weren't nomadic, as we've talked about earlier. They stayed in one place and lived in just the same as the Jumanos in adobe homes. They were known for their beautiful pottery. As we can see here in these two corner pictures, the elegance and the detail in which they painted and sculpted these potters. They were known for how beautiful their arts were. Now, like we talked about earlier, the Alabama-Coushatta, this Tigua Indian tribe is the second of only 3 tribes still living in Texas today. The first one, Alabama-Coushatta. The second one, which is our Tigua Indian tribe. Now, they live on a reservation outside of El Paso called Isleta del Sur. Now, the last tribe that we're going to talk about today is the Kickapoo tribe. Now, the reason I didn't put this tribe in a particular area was because this tribe was moved around so much by the U.S. government that, they likely came to Texas in the 1800s because of the many moves that they had to do. So that's what we have in information. They came to Texas around the 1800s. There's no specific date of when they came. They were forced to move so many times by the government. And third of all, they are the third of 3 native tribes still living in Texas today. They're one of the 3 tribes, but they are the third tribe that we've talked about so far. The Alabama-Coushatta, the Tigua, and the Kickapoo. Now, they were given a reservation south of Eagle Pass. Now, many of your parents, or if your parents like to gamble or go out and do things like that, like where you gamble money, you play cards, you play many of the games, the slot machines, they have that in Eagle Pass, in the Kickapoo Casino. That's what it's called. That is why a lot of people know of the Kickapoo reservation here right there in Eagle Pass. This concludes our video lesson for today on Chapter 4.2, Native Texans. This is Coach Signs, signing out.